Welcome to the Labor Forum. You are tuned into WRG 89.3 FM here in Atlanta. My name is Diane Mathewitz, and I'm the co-host of the Labor Forum, now going on, I think it's almost 4 years. Anyway, it's been a wonderful time here doing this program. I've had an opportunity to both meet and talk with so many wonderful people. As many of you know, I'm a retired auto worker and have been a long-time activist in the city, particularly on all the issues that impact working class people. And so, again, I want to thank you for tuning in to the Labor Forum here at WRFG. And if you've been listening to some of the other programs, you know that we are getting ready for our fall marathon, and that is how WRFG maintains itself. It is with the support of our listeners. So I want to encourage you to start thinking about the many ways in which you can support this station, so that we just celebrated our 41st birthday, so that we can continue onward and upward in improving our program, improving our technology. And for those of you that are listeners on an ongoing basis, you are aware that we've been having a number of problems here at the station with some of the technology, and it's just a matter that we're a 24/7 station, and we have many volunteers who come in and use the equipment, and it gets a lot of use. So we truly do need all kinds of support. So we need technological help. We always need financial assistance. So with that little kind of promotion, to encourage you to dig deep when the fall marathon comes up in a couple of weeks, I will now instead start the program and talk about the Labor Forum issues that you have come to appreciate this program for. The opinions that are expressed on the Labor Forum are not necessarily those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers here at WRFG. But the Labor Forum, like many of our, or all of our public affairs programs, go to forward the mission of this station. That was founded 41 years ago with a very specific intent that we would use the airwaves to promote equality, justice, and liberation for people, and that we would promote the cooperation of people in solving problems. So, as has been our want now for the last several months, we have some segments that we do in advance of our interview time. So I will go ahead with the labor headlines for September 29th, 2014. So here's an interesting story from Venezuela. This past Friday, hundreds of workers occupied two plants belonging to the Clorox company, the US-based manufacturer of cleaning products, after the facilities were abruptly abandoned by the multinational corporation. The workers found out they no longer had jobs via a recorded phone message. Apparently the bosses sent a text message telling them to call a phone number. And then when they called, what they heard was that the factories were closed immediately and the company was planning to sell them. Meanwhile, hundreds of workers were told that they literally were without income to support themselves and their families. So what the workers did is they seized the buildings. They are hoping the Venezuelan government will allow them to take over and run the plants. This is a quote. "We have enough experience to keep the business going. Lots of workers here have more than 8 years," said one of those keeping a 24-hour vigil at the facility south of Caracas. So that's what's happening in Venezuela. The boss closes down your job. Yeah, I guess you take it. Then here is some news about a victory to celebrate in Boston, where the Hyatt Hotels Corporation has agreed to pay $1 million to 98 housekeepers who were fired 5 years ago and replaced by lower subcontracted workers. The housekeepers had been told they were training temps who would cover their jobs during their days off. Instead, once these temporaries were trained in, the workers were fired and their jobs were filled by the 8-hour replacements, $8 an hour replacements. Although the 3 hotels where the firings took place were not unionized, the women contacted Local 26 of Unite Here, the hospitality workers union that represents roughly one quarter of Hyatt hotels nationally. A boycott of the 3 Boston hotels cost the chain an estimated $6 million. Community support from faith groups, students and community members, elected officials, and other unions bolstered the fired housekeepers' picket lines and rallies in front of the boycotted hotels, as well as interventions at stockholders' meetings. A possible factor in Hyatt's decision to settle now is its bid to operate a 1,000-room hotel in the expansion of Boston's Convention and Exhibition Center. The ongoing boycott and labor strife would present a negative element in the bidding process, according to one of the people involved in this. However, one of the housekeepers, Wanda Rosario, said that if Hyatt opens another non-union hotel in Boston, quote, they're going to see me in front of their hotel to try to put a union there, close quote. And locally in Atlanta this past Friday, in a show of the deep support for the work of the Task Force for the Homeless, donors came forward with almost $600,000 to pay in full the past due water bill accumulated by the building at the corner of Peachtree and Pine. Hundreds of homeless men, women, and children find not only shelter there, but important services in securing IDs, job assistance, and access to other social services, as well as temporary and permanent housing and more. Activists note that the city administration of Mayor Reed singled out the nonprofit's overdue water bill to criticize, rather than the bills owed by many profit-making entities and businesses that owed similar large amounts. The announcement by city officials that the bill had to be paid in full to prevent a pending water shutoff was seen as a further sign that the collaboration between downtown business interests and pro-developer city governments to drive the task force and its poor, mostly black male clients from downtown streets continues. The task force is hoping that a trial date for its lawsuit against Central Atlanta Progress and others will be set soon, so all the evidence of malfeasance can come out. And that's our labor headlines for today. And so we'll go to our next segment, and the one I always look forward to, which is the labor history for this week. I want to say hello to Paul McLennan, who does such a great job in searching out history that we all need to know. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Diane.
You're kind of breathless, huh? So we have an interesting segment, so please listen to this information.
Okay, today's event is important in the history of the state of Georgia. On October 1st, 1838, members of the Cherokee Nation began a forced march to Oklahoma called the Trail of Tears. Prior to this event, the fixed boundaries of the autonomous tribal nations comprising large areas of the United States were subject to continual cession and annexation, in part due to pressure from squatters and the threat of military force in the newly declared U.S. territories, federally administered regions whose boundaries overrode native treaty claims. As these territories became U.S. states, state governments sought to dissolve the boundaries of the Indian nations within their borders, which were independent of state jurisdiction, and to expropriate the land. These pressures were magnified by U.S. population growth and the expansion of slavery in the South, with the rapid development of cotton cultivation in the uplands due to the invention of the cotton gin. Many white settlers had pressured the federal government to move the Native Americans out of the Southeast. Some encroached on Indian lands and others wanted land made available to white settlers. Andrew Jackson helped gain congressional passage of the Indian Removal Act of 1830, which authorized the government to offer deals in order to do away with Native American title to lands in the Southeast. In Georgia, white resentment of the Cherokee had been building and reached a peak following the discovery of gold in northern Georgia. This discovery was made just after the creation and passage of the original Cherokee Nation Constitution and establishment of a Cherokee Supreme Court. Possessed by gold fever and a thirst for expansion, many white communities turned on their Cherokee neighbors. The U.S. government ultimately decided it was time for the Cherokees to be removed, leaving behind their farms, their land, and their homes. The U.S. military and Georgia militia expelled Cherokees from their homeland with little regard for Cherokee dignity or life. Families were taken out of their cabins and directed at gunpoint by soldiers. The wagons were lined up. The mood was somber. One reported that there was a silence and stillness of the voice that betrayed the sadness of the heart. Forced to leave most of their possessions behind, they watched while white Georgians took ownership of their cabins, looting and burning once cherished objects. Cherokees were loaded into stockades until the approved time of their departure, when they were divided into 13 groups of nearly 1,000 people, each with 2 appointed leaders. The travelers set out on multiple routes to cross Tennessee, Kentucky, Illinois, Missouri, and Arkansas at 10 miles a day with meager supplies. At points along the way, the straggling bands were charged fees by white farmers to cross privately owned land. The few wagons available were used to carry the sick, infant, and elderly. Most walked through the fall and into the harsh winter months, suffering the continual deaths of loved ones to cold, disease, and accident. Along the way, thousands died of sickness, dehydration, and exposure. It is a lesser-known historical fact that African American slaves, with their Cherokee owners, were also on the Trail of Tears. Enslaved blacks were enlisted to labor for Cherokees along the way. They hunted, chopped wood, nursed the sick, washed clothes, prepared the meals, guarded the camps at night, and hiked ahead to remove obstructions from the roads. The Trail of Tears is a sacred story to the Cherokees. It carries a meaningful lesson about greed and justice and the perseverance of a people. The Trail of Tears is an important moment, not only in Cherokee history, but also in black history. Descendants of slaves owned by Native people also claim this story as rightfully theirs. The United States had been formed only 50 years before this brutal genocidal event, on the premise that all men are created equal and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among these the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The intertwined histories of African Americans and Native Americans is important in understanding the truth about the origins of this country.
Thank you very much, Paul. There's almost nothing one can say after having just heard that, and I hope that our listeners, for many of us, it's probably some new information, and it's important Georgia information as well. I want to welcome our guest in the studio today. We have Kevin Moran, who is an active member in many circles, but he is a member of the Georgia Peace and Justice Coalition. Kevin attended the trial that took place just and ended last week, and we announced it last week on the Monday program as part of our labor headlines about the case in Quitman, Georgia. And the headline wasn't really able to give all the flavor and the ins and outs of this. And since it's such an important case, again, about repression and the fight for justice and the resistance of people, we thought we should talk about it a little bit more. So we invited Kevin, because he was in Quitman for much of the trial. Welcome to the Labor Forum, Kevin.
Thanks, Diane, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about the Quitman 10+2. This is a saga that begins with a labor issue. Educators, professionals, realizing that the county was balancing its budget on the backs of teachers. They neglected to appreciate the human race's most valuable natural resource, our young people. They valued the decrease in tax on the white rich aristocracies of Brooks County over that of educating all of our children. That led some professional educators, led by Dr. Nancy Denard, to run for the Quitman School Board. Never before in the history of Brooks County had there ever been a school board that represented the racial profile of the county. It had always been run by white, basically, males. These women decided for the children they were compelled to run for office. They also had the suspicion that black votes hadn't been counted in the past. They adopted a strategy that had been used very effectively by the Republican Party of an absentee voter campaign.
Absentee ballot.
Absentee ballot campaign. And they worked hard. And they went door to door. And they followed the law when it applies to election law. In fact, this case was against Lula Smart, who has a degree, a master's degree in criminal justice. They were meticulous in abiding by Georgia law regarding the election process, specifically the voting and request of absentee ballots. Then it came down, they won by over 60% of the vote. They were about to take office. The morning they were on their way to their first day as members of the Brooks County School Board, cop cars from the GBI, the local police, the county police, pulled up in front of their homes, in some cases on their lawns, and placed 10 of those women involved in this successful absentee ballot campaign under arrest on charges of voter fraud. They're charges that were not specific at all. Lula Smart, in fact, was arrested on 32 counts of voter fraud. In Georgia, she was accused of having handled a ballot or having transported a ballot to the mailbox or the post office. The prosecution chose to apply felony law to that, and Lula found herself looking at jail time for having engaged in the political process and expanded the voter base to include more people, as we think is the way a democracy is supposed to work, Diane.
So, Kevin, all this took place in 2010.
It took place in 2010. Then our governor, Nathan Deal, got involved and took an extraordinary action and removed the 3 successful candidates from the school board, 3 African American women. They had shifted the balance of power in the school board.
Because it's just 5.
Yep, shifted it to majority African American, representing the demographics of the county for the first time. With their removal by Governor Deal's decision, the good old boys, the good old boys, the old incumbents were put back on the school board. And these women were subjected to 4 years of intimidation, emotional abuse, and character assassination by the Secretary of State of Georgia with the complicity of the GBI. This trial, I don't think I'm entirely naive about the realities of racism in Georgia. But I was disgusted to see how far the state had gone to bring specious charges against these women. It was infuriating. C.B. King, the defense lawyer for these women, too often he's referred to, which he is, the son of Martin Luther King's primary attorney. But C.B., in his own right, is a brilliant defense attorney. And he stripped bare this onion of organized, structured candidate intimidation and voter suppression. And C.B. drilled to the core of it. C.B. questioned the state's primary witness was a postal employee named John Boone. And I'd never heard this done in a trial before, and it kind of woke me up when C.B. looked at him and said, "You're a liar, aren't you?" And C.B. went on to prove that he was a liar. This postal employee had written down the names and addresses off of the ballots that he said Lula Smart deposited into the drop-off box in the post office as he was there on duty. Saw her do it, wrote down the names and addresses. Well, first, and Paul, I know you're well aware of postal regulations. There may have been a slight irregularity in doing such things. Then C.B. went through the list of 15 people that he swore to God in multiple trials that he had written these down. And unfortunately, when you examined each of the 15, one never requested an absentee ballot by the registrar's records. 4 voted absentee and delivered the ballot directly to the post office. And the remainder received an absentee ballot but never chose to vote. So it was physically impossible that this man could have had the 15 absentee ballot return envelopes in his hand. Impossible. Then the next most important witness, the GBI agent, comes to the stand. She proudly testifies that on orders from her boss, they went door to door. She, with her badge and gun on her hip, along with a Secretary of State office representative, again armed, to over 400 doors in Brooks County. And she swore that these are representative of the entire population. We went to every neighborhood. It was completely randomized. However, CB on investigation indicated that, well, it was in fact over 98% African Americans that were subjected to this.
So, Kevin, I mean, this is really amazing detail about, as you said, the lengths to which a racist prosecution can go. As we reported last week, there was an acquittal. She was found not guilty. In addition, there had been 2 mistrials before. So I guess the question now is, after 4 years, there were 10 people originally, plus 2 more. Unfortunately, one of the defendants has died. So there then were 11 facing trial. Lula has gone to trial 3 times and been acquitted. So now there's 10 left. So what is the situation? Do they think that the state is going to keep pursuing because they got the same evidence or the same lack of evidence against the remaining 10, I believe?
They always asserted that their strongest case was against Lula Smart. Therefore, we expect, if there is a justice system, that they will drop the charges against all of the others that have been accused. We will be, CB King will be filing charges against the prosecutors for indictments that are selective. 10 people, white people, had sworn under oath to having committed on what these women were charged with doing. The GBI agent said, when asked, why didn't you arrest them? My boss told me not to arrest them. So we're going after the state.
So Kevin, our call for the next segment has just dialed in. So real quickly, if people are interested in this, I know there's a petition online to calling for the state to drop the charges. What kind of information do you have to give to our listeners about if they want to follow up and be supportive of the right of people to vote?
I'd suggest going to the Georgia Peace and Justice website, georgiapeace.org, spelled out. I'd also suggest going to the website for the Coalition for the People's Agenda. Another resource would be the Georgia Association for Black Elected Officials, GABIO. They have detailed information on this case also.
So thanks so much, Kevin, for dropping by today. And I know you followed this. You, as you said, you were there to hear all this incredible testimony. And we really, really appreciate that you brought it to our listeners.
Yeah, you're welcome, Diane. Thanks to the women that have the strength and the courage to stand up to the system.
And that was definitely true. If any of our listeners can imagine 4 years of being under threat of massive jail time, literally, we should have said that the winners, though, the women ran again and won again and are currently on the school board.
Won again 2 more times with a plurality of over 60% of the vote, as in the original election that was questioned.
All right. Thanks so much. Okay, we're clapping in the studio for Dr. Nancy Denard and all the others in Quitman and in Brooks County who have stood firm. Thanks again.